Han Solo stood in the center of the great chamber, feeling very small. The room was huge, with walls that seemed to stretch up forever. Around him sat beings from across the galaxy, each one representing a civilization older than human history. Their eyes watched him with the kind of look adults give to children playing dress-up. The Galactic Council chamber on Nexus Prime was the most important place in known space. Treaties were signed here. Wars were ended here. The fate of entire star systems was decided in this room. And now, for the first time, a human stood before the council. Ambassador Han Solo wore his best diplomatic uniform, dark blue with silver trim. He had practiced his speech 100 times. His hands held a data pad containing humanity's formal request to join the galactic community. After 200 years of space travel, Earth was finally ready to take its place among the stars. Or, so they hoped. The first to speak was Veltar of the Hegemony. The being was tall and made of what looked like living crystal. Light moved through his body in slow patterns. When he spoke, his voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. "Human Han Solo," Veltar said, and there was amusement in his voice. "Your species wishes to join our community. This is interesting." Behind Han Solo, his aide Yu Jin took careful notes. She was young but sharp, chosen for this mission because she never missed anything important. Her tablet recorded every word, every gesture, every slight hint of what these ancient beings really thought about humanity. A clicking sound came from the left side of the chamber. Thexam of the Corvani was laughing. At least, that's what the Universal Translator called it. The insect-like being's mandibles moved in a pattern that his species used to show amusement. "They want to join us," Thexam said to the other council members. The little mammals who just learned to leave their home star. How precious. More laughter echoed through the chamber. Not cruel laughter, but the kind adults share when children say something cute. Han Solo kept his face calm, but inside he was taking notes. Every species that laughed, every insult disguised as humor, every sign that they thought humans were beneath notice. The Zalari matriarch spoke next. She was beautiful in an alien way, with skin that shifted colors like oil on water. Her people had ruled a dozen star systems for 3,000 years. "Young human," she said, her voice musical, "your people have been in space for such a short time. Perhaps you should spend more years learning before you try to sit with adults." More chuckles from around the chamber. The Nexari trade prince, whose people controlled most of the galaxy's commerce, leaned forward with interest. "Though their planet does have some useful resources," he said. "Under proper management, of course. Perhaps they could serve as suppliers for more advanced civilizations." Han Solo's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained steady. "Honored council members, humanity believes we can contribute to galactic civilization. We have unique perspectives and capabilities that could benefit everyone." This brought open laughter from several council members. Veltar's crystal body flashed brighter with amusement. "Capabilities?" he asked. "Little human, my people conquered 17 star systems before your species discovered fire. The Corvani perfected energy weapons while you were still hitting rocks together. What could you possibly offer us?" Eugen's fingers moved quickly across her tablet. She was recording not just words, but also the casual arrogance, the complete dismissal. The way these beings talked about humanity like they weren't even in the room. The Andalite representative, a being that looked like a cross between a horse and a praying mantis, swished his blade-tipped tail. "Perhaps they could provide entertainment?" he suggested. "Their attempts at diplomacy are quite amusing." More laughter. Han Solo noticed that not every council member was laughing. A few watched silently, studying the human delegation with more serious eyes, but they were clearly in the minority. The session continued for 2 hours. Each council member took their turn speaking about humanity's request. Each one found new ways to politely explain why humans weren't ready for real galactic civilization. The Corvani had been fighting wars in space for millennia. They found human military technology adequate for pest control. The Zalari had mastered energy manipulation. They called human fusion drives a cute first attempt. The Nexari controlled trade routes spanning hundreds of light years. They suggested Humans might be allowed to sell raw materials to real civilizations. Through it all, Han Solo remained calm and diplomatic. He answered their questions with patience. He accepted their insults with grace. He played the part of the humble supplicant perfectly. But Yujin watched his eyes. In those dark depths, she saw something the aliens missed. Han Solo wasn't just enduring their mockery, he was studying them, learning their weaknesses, cataloging their arrogance. Finally, the formal session ended. Veltar announced the Council's decision. The Galactic Council grants humanity provisional observer status, he declared. You may attend our sessions and learn how proper civilizations conduct themselves. In perhaps a few centuries, when you have matured sufficiently, we may consider full membership. The other council members nodded approvingly. They had been generous. They had allowed the children to sit at the grown-up table even if they couldn't participate in adult conversations. Han Solo bowed formally. The Terran Federation is honored by the Council's wisdom and generosity. As the session ended and the various delegates began to leave, small groups formed around the chamber. Han Solo noticed how they clustered by species and alliance. The Corvani and hegemony representatives spoke in low tones. The Zalari and Nexari exchanged meaningful looks. None of them invited the humans to join their conversations. Yujin approached Han Solo as the chamber emptied. "Sir, shall I prepare our response to Earth?" Han Solo nodded, his diplomatic mask finally slipping slightly. For just a moment, Yujin saw the cold intelligence behind his calm facade. "Send a full report of everything we observed today," he said, quietly. "Include detailed behavioral analysis of each council member. Note which species seem to be allies, which have tensions, and which might be approached separately." "And our recommendation, sir?" Han Solo looked around the now empty chamber. This room had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. It had witnessed the birth of galactic empires and the signing of treaties that shaped known space. Today, it had seen something new. Humanity's first official appearance on the galactic stage. The council members thought they had seen weak supplicants begging for acceptance. They thought they had dealt with another primitive species that could be safely ignored or exploited. They were wrong. "Recommendation?" Han Solo said, his voice carrying a note Yujin had never heard before. "Tell them to proceed to Phase 2. That night, in their modest quarters at the human embassy, Han Solo composed his real report. Not the diplomatic summary that would go through official channels, but the detailed intelligence assessment that would reach certain very interested parties on Earth. He wrote about the hegemony's casual assumption of superiority, about the Corvani's outdated military thinking, about the Zalari's obsession with showing off their technology, about how every species had revealed far more about their capabilities and weaknesses than they realized. The galaxy's great powers had made a critical error. They had assumed that because humanity was young, they were also naive. They had treated the human delegation like amusing pets, never imagining that those pets might be taking very careful notes. Yujin knocked softly on his door. "Sir, the encrypted channel to Earth is ready." Han Solo sealed his report and handed it to her. "Priority transmission, eyes only for Director Hyun-woo." As Yujin left to send the message, Han Solo returned to his window. Outside, the lights of Nexus Prime stretched to the horizon. Ships from a dozen species came and went from the orbital platforms. The galaxy's most important trade hub never slept. Somewhere in that flow of traffic were human ships. Not many, and they kept a low profile. But they were there watching and learning, just as Han Solo had been watching and learning today. The Council had given humanity observer status. They thought they were being generous to an inferior species. What they didn't realize was that humans were very, very good at observing, and they were even better at remembering. Phase 2 was about to begin. 3 months after the Council session, the galaxy watched humanity with the same interest people might show a new pet learning tricks. Captain Minho of the exploration ship Terra Nova had become something of a celebrity in galactic news feeds. Not because he was particularly impressive, but because watching humans try to be diplomatic was considered entertaining. The Terra Nova was humanity's newest exploration vessel, and to galactic observers, it looked exactly like what they expected, from a primitive species. The ship was functional but plain, with none of the elegant curves of Zalari vessels or the intimidating bulk of Corvani dreadnoughts. It looked, as one Nexari commentator put it, like a flying toolbox. Minho didn't mind the mockery. He had his orders, and they were simple. Make contact with minor civilizations in the Outer Rim territories. Show the flag. Be friendly. And most importantly, listen to everything. His first stop was the Rythan colonies, a cluster of mining worlds controlled by an insectoid species that served the hegemony. The Rythan were not major players in galactic politics, but they were perfect for humanity's purposes. They were talkative, proud of their technology, and completely convinced that humans were beneath their notice. The Terra Nova approached the main Rythan colony world with all proper diplomatic protocols. Minho requested permission to land and meet with local officials. He followed every rule in the Galactic Diplomatic Code. The response was insulting. "Unknown human vessel," came the transmission from Rythan Control. "You may land at Pad 7. That's where we put the garbage haulers." Minho's crew exchanged glances. Pad 7 was indeed where cargo ships dumped their waste, but Minho just smiled and acknowledged the instructions politely. On the surface, things got worse. The human delegation was led by So Young, a xenobiologist who had volunteered for diplomatic duty. She was brilliant, spoke 6 galactic languages, and had studied Rythan culture for months. None of that mattered to the Rythan officials who met them. Queen Velthera received the humans in what was clearly a storage room. She didn't even bother to look at them directly, instead focusing on a datapad while her translator spoke to the delegation. "The Queen wishes to know why small mammals think they deserve her time," the translator said. "She suggests you state your business quickly before she remembers you exist." So Young maintained her composure perfectly. She presented humanity's gifts, samples of Earth art and culture, technological demonstrations, offers of trade partnerships. Each offering was dismissed with barely concealed amusement. When So Young attempted to discuss potential mining agreements, the Queen's translator actually laughed out loud. "The Queen finds your proposal adorable," he said. "Perhaps when your species learns to build proper mining equipment, we might consider letting you work in our less important operations." The meeting lasted exactly 15 minutes. The humans were politely but firmly escorted back to their ship, with the suggestion that they practice diplomacy with someone more appropriate to their level. But as the Terra Nova lifted off from the Rythan world, So Young was smiling. Her data recorder had captured everything: detailed scans of Rythan mining equipment, tactical assessments of their defensive positions, complete recordings of their communication systems. The Rythan had been so busy being condescending that they never noticed the humans were studying everything. Back on Kepler Station, the galaxy's largest trade hub, cultural attaché Dae Hyun was having similar experiences. The massive space station was home to dozens of species, and it served as the perfect place to observe galactic civilization in action. Dae Hyun had set up a small office in the station's diplomatic quarter. His official job was to help human traders understand galactic customs. His real job was to watch and listen. The office was perfectly positioned. Through his windows, he could observe the docking bays where ships from across the galaxy came and went. His location in the diplomatic quarter meant he overheard countless conversations between species representatives. And his status as a primitive human meant that most beings talked freely around him, assuming he couldn't understand the implications of what they were saying. He watched Corvani military officers discuss fleet deployments over drinks. He overheard Zalari scientists complaining about the limitations of their energy weapons. He recorded Nexari traders arguing about shipping routes and cargo manifests. All of this information flowed back to Earth in carefully coded transmissions. But Dae Hyun's most valuable intelligence came from an unexpected source: the galactic news networks. The galaxy's media was fascinated by humanity's early diplomatic efforts. News shows featured regular segments about those amusing humans and their attempts to establish trade relationships. Military analysts appeared on discussion programs to explain why human technology was so primitive. A particularly popular show called Galactic Perspectives devoted an entire episode to humanity's military capabilities. The host, a Corvani general named Thexvar, spent an hour explaining why human warships posed no threat to any major power. "Look at this design," Thexvar said, displaying technical specifications of human destroyers that had been shared during diplomatic meetings. Their weapons are adequate for fighting pirates, but against a real military? A single Corvani dreadnought could defeat their entire fleet. The studio audience, representatives from major galactic powers, nodded in agreement. Several made jokes about human escape pods with delusions of grandeur. Dae-hyun recorded every word, not because the mockery bothered him, but because the aliens were revealing far more than they realized. Thexvar's casual dismissal included detailed information about Corvani shield frequencies, weapon ranges, and tactical doctrines. The other guests added their own species' capabilities to the discussion, each trying to prove they were even more superior to the humans. By the end of the show, Dae-hyun had acquired more intelligence about galactic military capabilities than a spy might gather in years of dangerous work. And the aliens had given it to him freely because they thought he was too primitive to understand its value. Meanwhile, on the border worlds, Captain Min-ho continued his diplomatic tour. Each stop followed the same pattern: initial dismissal, condescending meetings, casual displays of technology that the aliens assumed humans couldn't comprehend. At the Zalari research station on Gamma Centauri, the local administrator actually gave the human delegation a tour of their latest plasma weapon prototypes. "Since you couldn't possibly understand how they work," she explained, "there's no harm in letting you see them." The Nexari trade port on Kepler-4 offered humanity a generous deal to transport raw materials for established galactic powers. The port manager explained the galaxy's shipping routes in detail, assuming the humans would need extensive education about how real civilizations handle logistics. Every species they encountered made the same mistake. They saw humanity's small ships, basic technology, and humble diplomatic approach, and assumed they were dealing with primitives. They never imagined that those primitives might be conducting the most successful intelligence-gathering operation in galactic history. Back on Earth, Director Hyun-woo reviewed the intelligence flowing in from across the galaxy. His office, deep beneath the Himalayas, had become the hub of humanity's real preparation for galactic civilization. The walls were covered with star charts showing every major power's territory, trade routes, and military installations. Tactical displays showed detailed breakdowns of alien weapon systems, shield frequencies, and defensive capabilities. Cultural analysis reports documented the psychology and weaknesses of each species humanity had encountered. "They're making this too easy," Hyun-woo told his aide as they reviewed the latest intelligence from Kepler Station. "They're so convinced of their superiority that they're giving us everything we need to defeat them." His aide, a young intelligence officer named Ji-won, looked up from her data analysis. "Sir, should we be concerned that it's going this smoothly? What if it's some kind of test?" Hyun-woo considered the question. He had been wondering the same thing. The galaxy's great powers had ruled space for millennia. Surely they couldn't all be this arrogant and careless. But the evidence was overwhelming. Every diplomatic contact, every casual conversation, every media appearance revealed the same pattern. The aliens genuinely believed humanity was primitive and harmless. They weren't testing human capabilities. They were dismissing them entirely. "No," Hyun-woo finally said. "This isn't a test. This is exactly what it appears to be. The arrogance of ancient powers who have forgotten that new threats can emerge." He turned to another aide, Communications Officer Seo-jin. "Send a message to Admiral Tae-ho. Tell him that Phase 2 is proceeding ahead of schedule. The intelligence we're gathering exceeds our most optimistic projections. And our timeline." "For Phase 3, sir?" Hyun-woo looked at the tactical displays showing humanity's true military preparations. Hidden shipyards throughout the Sol system were working around the clock. New technologies developed from captured alien data were being integrated into human designs. Earth's real defensive capabilities were growing stronger every day. "Sooner than planned," he said. "Much sooner." Across the galaxy, humanity's diplomatic missions continued their humble, respectful work. Alien beings continued to laugh at human primitiveness while the war between the hegemony and the Andorian collective started over a mining rights dispute. It was the kind of conflict that erupted regularly in the galaxy, two major powers flexing their muscles over resources that neither really needed. The Galactic Council had seen it all before. What they hadn't seen before was how humanity would respond. Ambassador Yoon-ji had replaced Han Sol as humanity's primary representative 6 months earlier. Where Han Sol had been diplomatic and patient, Unji was sharp and direct. Her background as a military strategist showed in everything she did, from how she analyzed diplomatic situations to how she positioned herself during council meetings. When the first Andorian raiders destroyed a hegemony mining station, killing 300 workers, Yunji was the only council representative who didn't immediately choose a side. This conflict serves no one's interests, she told the emergency session. Both sides have legitimate claims. Both sides have suffered losses. Perhaps mediation would be more productive than choosing who to support in another pointless war. Other council members dismissed her suggestion with familiar condescension. Veltar of the hegemony spoke for most of them when he said, "Young human, you don't understand the complexities of galactic politics. Some conflicts can only be resolved through strength." Yunji said nothing more during the session, but her eyes never stopped moving, cataloging which species supported which side, which alliances were forming, which representatives seemed uncomfortable with the rush toward war. Within days, the conflict escalated beyond anyone's control. Andorian battlecruisers attacked hegemony shipping lanes. Hegemony dreadnoughts responded by bombarding Andorian colonies. The Corvani military began mobilizing to support their hegemony allies, while the Zalari prepared their own fleets for what everyone assumed would be a quick, decisive war. It was during this chaos that the galaxy got its first real look at human military capabilities. Captain Jamin commanded the reconnaissance ship Shadow Walker, a vessel that most galactic intelligence services had classified as a primitive survey craft. The ship was small, unremarkable, and had spent months moving through Outer Rim territories on what appeared to be routine mapping missions. When the war erupted, the Shadow Walker was near the contested border region. Jamin received new orders from Earth: provide humanitarian assistance to civilian casualties, gather intelligence on military operations, and maintain human neutrality. What happened next shocked every military observer in the galaxy. The first sign that something was different came when an Andorian medical ship, the Healing Light, sent out a distress call. The vessel was carrying wounded civilians from a bombed colony, but it had wandered into a combat zone and was now trapped behind hegemony lines. 3 hegemony patrol ships were closing in, their commanders convinced the medical ship was actually a disguised military transport. Standard galactic protocol said the medical ship was doomed. It was too far behind enemy lines for Andorian forces to reach, and the hegemony ships wouldn't listen to surrender signals from what they believed was a military target. The Shadow Walker changed course toward the medical ship at maximum speed. "Human vessel," came the transmission from the lead hegemony patrol ship. "You are entering a combat zone. Alter course immediately or be fired upon." Jamin's response was calm and professional. "Hegemony vessels, this is Captain Jamin of the Terran, Federation ship Shadow Walker. We are responding to a medical emergency. The vessel you are pursuing is carrying wounded civilians and poses no military threat." The hegemony captain's reply was filled with contempt. "Human, your primitive sensors cannot distinguish military targets from civilian ships. Withdraw immediately, or be destroyed." Instead of withdrawing, the Shadow Walker accelerated. As it approached the medical ship, something impossible happened. The human vessel seemed to flicker and become transparent. Not invisible exactly, but difficult to focus on. Hegemony targeting systems struggled to maintain locks on the ship. When the lead hegemony patrol vessel opened fire, its plasma bolts passed harmlessly through empty space. The Shadow Walker had somehow evaded weapons fire without appearing to change course. Then the human ship returned fire. The energy beams that lanced out from the Shadow Walker were unlike anything in known galactic arsenals. They cut through the hegemony ship's shields like they weren't there, carving precise holes in armor that should have been impenetrable. The patrol ship's weapons fell silent, its engines died, but the ship itself remained intact. "Hegemony vessel," Jamin transmitted, "your weapons and engines have been disabled. Your life support and crew quarters are undamaged. Please stand down and allow us to complete our humanitarian mission." The other 2 hegemony ships opened fire together, concentrating their full firepower on the human vessel. The Shadow Walkers, shields that galactic intelligence had dismissed as adequate for small asteroids, absorbed the attack without visible strain. Jamin's response was swift and precise. 2 more energy beams disabled the remaining patrol ships. Not destroyed, disabled. Their crews were unharmed, their ships intact, but powerless. The Shadow Walker docked with the Andorian medical ship, transferred emergency supplies, and escorted it safely to neutral space. The entire operation took less than an hour. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as recordings of the engagement spread across every news network. The primitive humans had faced 3 hegemony patrol ships and won without killing anyone. But that was just the beginning. Captain Mi Young commanded the escort destroyer Defiant, another ship that Galactic Intelligence had dismissed as a lightly armed transport. When Corvani raiders began attacking civilian shipping near the Tau Ceti system, the Defiant was ordered to investigate. The Corvani raiders were veterans of dozens of conflicts, piloting ships that had conquered star systems. When they detected the approaching human vessel, they saw an opportunity for easy prey. "Unknown human ship," transmitted the Corvani raid leader. "Surrender your vessel and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will be met with destruction." Mi Young's response was professional but firm. "Corvani vessels, you are attacking civilian ships in violation of galactic law. Cease hostile actions and withdraw from this system." The Corvani response was 3 ships diving toward the Defiant at attack speed, their weapons charging for a killing blow. The engagement lasted 90 seconds. The human destroyer moved like nothing the Corvani had ever seen. It accelerated and turned with impossible precision, its inertial compensators allowing maneuvers that should have killed the crew. When the Corvani opened fire, the Defiant's point defense systems intercepted every shot with mechanical precision. The human ship's return fire was devastating. Energy weapons that looked similar to standard galactic designs but performed far beyond any known specifications. The lead Corvani raider simply ceased to exist, its shields and armor offering no protection whatsoever. The second raider tried to retreat. The Defiant's weapons reached out across impossible distances and crippled the fleeing ship's engines. The third raider surrendered immediately, its captain begging for mercy. For the first time in centuries, Corvani warriors had fled from battle. The news reached the Galactic Council within hours. Emergency sessions were called. Intelligence reports were demanded. How had the primitive humans developed such advanced technology? Ambassador Yunji provided the answer during a closed council session, and her words sent shockwaves through every major power. "Honored council members," she said, her voice carrying none of the deference that previous human representatives had shown. "For months, you have shared your technology with us. You have demonstrated your weapons, explained your tactics, and revealed your capabilities. You did this because you believed we were too primitive to understand what you were showing us." She paused, letting the implications sink in. "You were wrong." The silence in the chamber was absolute. Every representative understood what Yunji was saying, but none wanted to believe it. "Every weapon system you showed us in mockery, we improved. Every tactical doctrine you explained while laughing at our ignorance, we studied and adapted. Every weakness you revealed through arrogance, we cataloged and prepared to exploit." Veltar of the hegemony was the first to find his voice. "You're saying you learned from our demonstrations?" Yunji nodded. "We're very good listeners, and we're even better at learning from our mistakes. The mistake we made was assuming you would treat us with respect. We won't make that mistake again." The council erupted in angry voices. Representatives demanded explanations, made threats, called for immediate action. But Yunji remained calm, in the center of the storm. "The Terran Federation wishes only peace," she said when the noise died down. "We will continue to provide humanitarian aid wherever it's needed. We will protect civilian shipping from pirates and raiders. We will honor our observer status and respect galactic law." She stood to leave, then turned back to face the stunned council members. "But we will no longer tolerate being treated as inferiors. We are not your pets, your servants, or your entertainment. We are your equals, whether you acknowledge it or not." As Yunji left the chamber, the galactic powers sat in shocked silence. The species they had dismissed as harmless primitives had just announced that they possessed military technology superior to anything The emergency session of the Galactic Council lasted 18 hours. Behind closed doors, with no human representatives present, the galaxy's great powers tried to understand how badly they had miscalculated. Veltar of the Hegemony stood before, a holographic display showing tactical recordings from the recent engagements. The crystalline being's internal light pulsed with agitation as he replayed the destruction of his patrol ships. "This is impossible," he said for the third time. "Our intelligence reports clearly stated that human technology was primitive. Their weapons were classified as adequate for local defense only. Their ships were described as functional but unremarkable." Intelligence Director Zephyron of the Nexari touched his control pad, bringing up classified reports from the past year. The lizard-like being's scales had taken on the dark color pattern that indicated extreme concern. "Our error was in believing their public demonstrations represented their actual capabilities," Zephyron admitted. "Every piece of technology they showed us during diplomatic meetings was deliberately simplified. Every technical specification they shared was intentionally incomplete." Thexim of the Corvani, whose warriors had fled from human ships for the first time in their history, slammed his clawed hand against the table. "You're telling me they've been lying to us from the beginning?" "Not lying," corrected the Zalari matriarch, her skin shifting to the color patterns that indicated deep thought. "Misdirecting. There's a significant difference. They showed us exactly what they wanted us to see while keeping their real capabilities hidden." The holographic display changed to show long-range sensor readings from the Sol system. What they revealed made every council member fall silent. Earth's star system was not the primitive backwater they had imagined. Hidden throughout the asteroid belt, concealed behind stealth fields and sensor shadows, were massive industrial complexes, shipyards that dwarfed anything in hegemony space, manufacturing facilities that could produce fleets of warships. "How long have they been building this?" Veltar asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zephyron consulted his data. "Based on energy signatures and material flow analysis, construction began approximately 6 months after their first diplomatic contact with the Council. They've been preparing for war since the day they met us." The revelation hit the chamber like a physical blow. The humans hadn't stumbled into advanced technology through luck or accident. They had planned this from the beginning. Every diplomatic meeting, every cultural exchange, every moment of apparent inferiority had been carefully calculated. "Show me their fleet strength," demanded Thexim. The holographic display shifted again, showing what Nexari intelligence had been able to determine about human military assets. The numbers were staggering. 300 ships of destroyer class or larger, 50 heavy cruisers mounting weapons that could penetrate any known defense, 20 battleships that outmassed the largest Corvani dreadnoughts, and at the center of it all, hidden in the shadows behind Earth's moon, something that defied classification entirely. "What is that?" asked the Zalari matriarch, pointing to the massive sensor shadow. "We don't know," Zephyron admitted. "It's larger than anything in our databases. Our best estimate puts it at nearly 5 kilometers long. Whatever it is, it represents a level of engineering we've never seen from the humans. Or from anyone else," he didn't add, but the implication hung in the air. The council members sat in stunned silence, absorbing the scope of their miscalculation. The primitive species they had patted on the head and sent away with observer status possessed one of the most powerful military forces in known space. "How did we miss this?" Veltar asked. "How did every intelligence service in the galaxy fail to detect a military buildup of this magnitude?" The answer came from an unexpected source. A junior Nexari intelligence officer named Kessatar had been analyzing human communication patterns for months. His findings painted a picture of systematic deception that impressed even seasoned spies. "The humans compartmentalized everything," Kessatar explained to the council. "Their diplomatic corps genuinely believed they were representing a peaceful, technologically inferior civilization. Most of their space crews were never told about the military preparations. Even their industrial workers thought they were building civilian infrastructure." He brought up communication intercepts, showing conversations between human diplomatic personnel. The recordings revealed genuine surprise when human military capabilities were first demonstrated. "Their own ambassadors didn't know," Kessatar continued. "When they expressed shock at their military's performance, they weren't acting. They were as surprised as we were. The implications were chilling. Humanity had conducted a deception operation so complete that even their own people were unaware of its scope." Somewhere on Earth, a small group of individuals had orchestrated the greatest intelligence coup in galactic history. Who planned this? Demanded Thexim. Who is responsible for their strategy? Zephyron consulted his files. Our analysis suggests a coordinating authority they call Strategic Planning Directorate. The head of this organization appears to, be someone named Hyun Woo, though we have very little information about him or his background. The name meant nothing to any council member, but they all understood its significance. Somewhere in the human power structure was a strategic mind capable of outthinking the combined intelligence services of multiple galactic civilizations. What about their technology? Asked the Zalari matriarch. How did they develop weapons superior to ours in such a short time? This question had been troubling galactic scientists since the first engagement recordings were analyzed. Human weapons performed beyond the theoretical limits of known physics. Their defensive systems operated on principles that seemed impossible. They reverse-engineered everything we showed them, Zephyron explained. But that's only part of the story. Analysis of their weapon signatures suggests they've made fundamental breakthroughs in energy manipulation and matter conversion. He brought up technical specifications that made the assembled representatives uncomfortable. Human weapons weren't just improved versions of galactic technology, they represented entirely new approaches to warfare. Their energy weapons operate at frequencies our shields can't deflect, he continued. Their defensive systems seem to manipulate subspace in ways we don't understand. And their stealth technology is so advanced that we can barely detect their ships, even when we know where to look. The council members exchanged worried glances. They were facing not just a hidden fleet, but revolutionary technology that made their own weapons obsolete. What are our options? Veltar asked. The question hung in the air for several minutes. Each representative understood that they were discussing potential responses to a civilization that had demonstrated the ability to defeat their forces in direct combat. We could demand inspection of their facilities, suggested the Zalari matriarch. With what authority? Thexim replied. They have observer status, not membership. We have no legal right to inspect their territory. We could revoke their observer status and declare them a threat to galactic security, offered the Andalite representative. And then what? Asked Zephyrin. Their fleet could challenge any of our individual militaries. Combined, they might be able to face all of us simultaneously. The mathematics of the situation were stark. Humanity had built a military force capable of threatening every major power in the galaxy. They had done it in secret, using intelligence gathered through diplomatic channels. And they had revealed their capabilities only when they were ready. There is another option, said a quiet voice from the back of the chamber. All eyes turned to Elder Nixara of the Ancient Confederacy. The Confederacy rarely participated in council politics, preferring to observe from the shadows. When Elder Nixara spoke, it usually meant the situation was more serious than anyone realized. We could accept them as equals, she said simply. The suggestion sent shockwaves through the chamber. Accept the humans as equals? The species that had been in space for barely 2 centuries? They have proven their military capabilities, Elder Nixara continued. They have demonstrated technological innovation beyond our own. They have shown strategic thinking that outmaneuvered our combined intelligence services. What more proof of equality do you require? Veltar's crystal form flashed with indignation. They deceived us. They made fools of us. How can we trust them now? How can we afford not to? Elder Nixara replied. They could have used their superior technology to conquer us. Instead, they used it to protect civilians and stop pirates. They could have demanded submission from their position of strength. Instead, they ask only for respect. The Elder's words carried the weight of millennia. The Ancient Confederacy had seen the rise and fall of dozens of galactic civilizations. If they recognized humanity as a legitimate power, others would have to follow. The humans have taught us a valuable lesson, Elder Nixara concluded. Never assume that new civilizations are inferior simply because they are young. Sometimes the student surpasses the teacher more quickly than anyone expects. As the council session finally ended, each representative faced the same uncomfortable reality. The galaxy had a new major power, and that power had achieved its position by being systematically underestimated. The coalition fleet that approached the Sol system was the largest military force assembled in 1,000 years. 12 dreadnoughts from 4 different species, supported by 40 cruisers and countless smaller vessels. It was enough firepower. to devastate entire star systems. At its head flew the Corvani super dreadnought Conquest of Stars, Admiral Thexim's flagship. The massive vessel was 5 kilometers of crystalline armor and plasma weaponry, a monument to Corvani military supremacy. It had never been defeated in battle. Today, it was leading the galaxy's response to humanity's deception. The Coalition's demands were simple: immediate inspection of all human military facilities, surrender of advanced weapons technology, and acceptance of protective oversight by established galactic powers. In other words, complete submission disguised as diplomacy. Nobody expected the humans to fight. The Coalition fleet represented combined military might that had conquered galaxies. Earth's defense forces, however advanced, couldn't possibly match such overwhelming power. They were about to learn how wrong that assumption was. Admiral Tae Ho of the Terran Defense Fleet received the Coalition's ultimatum while sitting in his command center deep beneath the lunar surface. The facility was hidden behind layers of stealth fields and defensive barriers that made it invisible to conventional sensors. Tae Ho was a small man with calm eyes and steady hands. He had spent his career preparing for this moment, building humanity's defenses while the galaxy laughed at their primitive efforts. Now finally his preparations would be tested. "Signal from the Coalition fleet, Admiral," reported his communications officer, Lieutenant Yoon Seo. "Admiral Thexim demands immediate surrender of our advanced weapons and submission to galactic oversight." Tae Ho studied the tactical display showing the approaching alien fleet. 12 dreadnoughts, 40 cruisers, and nearly 200 smaller vessels. It was indeed an impressive force. It was also exactly what he had been expecting. "Send our reply," Tae Ho ordered. "The Terran Federation welcomes peaceful visitors to our system. However, we cannot permit armed fleets to approach Earth without invitation." On the bridge of the Conquest of Stars, Admiral Thexim read the human response and laughed. The primitive mammals still thought they could negotiate from a position of weakness. "Human Admiral," Thexim broadcast to the entire system, "you face the combined might of 4 galactic civilizations. Your continued deception has forced us to demonstrate the futility of resistance. Surrender now, and your species will be permitted to survive under proper guidance." The response came not from Admiral Tae Ho, but from a single human ship that appeared on the Coalition's sensors. The vessel identified itself as the heavy cruiser Indomitable, commanded by Captain Bo Ram. The Indomitable was alone against the massed firepower of the Coalition fleet. To galactic observers, it looked like a suicide mission. Captain Bo Ram was a veteran of countless border skirmishes and anti-piracy operations. She had been chosen for this moment not just for her tactical skills, but for her absolute confidence in human technology and training. "Coalition fleet," she transmitted calmly. "You are entering Terran space without authorization. Alter course immediately or prepare to be turned back." The laughter that echoed across the Coalition communication channels could be heard throughout the galaxy. News networks broadcast the exchange live, with commentators noting the amusing audacity of a single human ship challenging an entire fleet. Admiral Thexim opened a private channel to his fellow commanders. "I almost feel sorry for them," he said. "Their delusions of military capability are touching in their innocence." The Zalari Admiral Kethara, commanding 3 dreadnoughts on the Coalition's left flank, agreed. "Perhaps a quick demonstration of our firepower will convince them to surrender without further bloodshed." "No," Thexim replied. "Let me handle this personally. It's only fitting that I end their arrogance myself." The Conquest of Stars moved forward, leaving the rest of the Coalition fleet behind. Thexim intended to destroy the human cruiser with a single salvo, demonstrating the futility of resistance. He never got the chance. The Indomitable opened fire at a range that should have been impossible. Human weapons reached across empty space and struck the super dreadnought's shields with devastating precision. Energy beams that operated on principles galactic science didn't understand carved through defensive barriers that had never been breached. The Conquest of Stars, pride of the Corvani fleet, died in 17 seconds. The massive vessel simply came apart as human weapons systematically destroyed every critical system. Shields failed, armor vaporized, and the ship's reactor core went critical. In less than half a minute, the galaxy's most powerful warship was nothing but expanding debris. Before the Coalition could recover from their shock, more human ships appeared. Not just 1 or 2, but dozens. Stealth fields dropped to reveal destroyers, cruisers, and battleships positioned throughout the outer system. The humans had been watching and waiting, ready to spring their trap. Captain Jamin's destroyer squadron materialized behind the Coalition's right flank, their enhanced engines allowing impossible acceleration. Captain Mi Young's heavy cruisers appeared above and below the alien formation, their weapons already charging for synchronized strikes. In minutes, the Coalition fleet found itself completely surrounded by forces they had never detected. "This is impossible," transmitted Admiral Cathara as her sensors struggled to track the human vessels. "Where did they all come from?" The answer came from Admiral Tae-ho himself, his voice calm and professional as it reached every ship in the I system. "Admiral Cathara, your fleet entered our space with hostile intent and opened fire on our vessels. You are now surrounded by the Terran Defense Fleet. Surrender immediately, and your crews will be treated according to galactic conventions of war." The Coalition commanders found themselves facing a tactical nightmare. Their massive fleet, designed to intimidate through overwhelming force, was trapped by smaller, faster, more advanced human vessels that could strike from any direction. Admiral Thexim, commanding from his backup flagship after the loss of the conquest of stars, made the decision to fight. Pride and reputation demanded that the Coalition powers not surrender to primitive humans. "All ships, engage at will," he ordered. "Show these mammals the price of defying their betters." The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Coalition ships, built for traditional line-of-battle tactics, found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to follow conventional rules. Human vessels moved with impossible agility, their advanced inertial systems allowing maneuvers that should have killed their crews. They struck from multiple directions simultaneously, concentrating fire on critical systems with surgical precision. Captain Bo-Ram's cruiser group engaged the hegemony dreadnoughts directly, their weapons punching through crystal armor like it was glass. Captain Jamin's destroyers hunted Coalition cruisers with pack tactics, using their stealth systems to appear and disappear at will. The Coalition's numerical advantage meant nothing when their ships couldn't hit targets that moved faster than their weapons could track. Their superior firepower was useless when human shields absorbed their most powerful attacks without strain. Within an hour, half the Coalition fleet was destroyed or disabled. The survivors found themselves completely outmatched by technology they couldn't understand and tactics they couldn't counter. Admiral Cathara, her flagship crippled and her escort destroyed, sent a general surrender signal. "Terran fleet, we yield. Request terms for the withdrawal of surviving vessels." The fighting stopped immediately. Human ships held their positions but ceased fire, their crews maintaining perfect discipline even in the moment of absolute victory. Captain Bo-Ram responded to the surrender with characteristic professionalism. "Admiral Cathara, collect your surviving ships and withdraw from this system. Any future approach to Earth by Coalition forces will be considered an act of war." As the battered remains of the Coalition fleet limped away from Sol, galactic civilization struggled to comprehend what had happened. The most powerful military force in 1,000 years had been decisively defeated by a species that most considered primitive. News networks struggled to explain how human technology had proven so superior. Military analysts revised their estimates of Terran capabilities upward, then revised them again as the scope of human victory became clear. On Earth, Admiral Tae-ho watched the retreating alien fleet with satisfaction. The plan he had spent years developing had worked perfectly. Humanity's true military capabilities were no longer secret, but that no longer mattered. The galaxy now knew that the Terran Federation possessed the most advanced military force in known space. More importantly, they knew that humanity was willing to use that force to defend their interests. "Send a message to the Galactic Council," Tae-ho ordered his communication staff. "Inform them that the Terran Federation is prepared to discuss terms for full membership in the galactic community." This time, he was confident. The galaxy would listen with respect rather than amusement. The age of human expansion had begun with a demonstration of strength that would be remembered for millennia. The species that had been laughed at and dismissed had proven they belonged among the galaxy's great powers. Whether the established civilized, the Galactic Council chamber had never been so quiet. 3 days after the Battle of Sol, representatives from across known space sat in stunned silence as they watched recordings of the Coalition fleet's defeat. The holographic display showed the Corvani super-dreadnought conquest of stars being destroyed in 17 seconds. It showed human vessels appearing from nowhere to surround the galaxy's most powerful military force. It showed alien admirals surrendering to ships they had dismissed as primitive just hours earlier. Ambassador Eugene, now serving as Earth's chief diplomatic officer, stood calmly in the center of the chamber. The young woman who had once taken notes while aliens laughed at humanity now faced those same beings from a position of absolute strength. "Honored council members," she began, her voice carrying none of the deference previous human representatives had shown. "The Terran Federation formally requests full membership in the galactic community." The words were simple, but their implications sent shockwaves through the assembled representatives. This wasn't the humble petition of a primitive species hoping for acceptance. This was a demand from a military superpower that had just demonstrated its ability to defeat any force in known space. Veltar of the Hegemony was the first to respond. The crystalline being's internal light flickered weakly as he spoke. "The Hegemony acknowledges that recent events have changed the strategic balance of galactic civilization." It was as close to an admission of defeat as proud Veltar could manage. His fleet had been crushed, his military supremacy shattered, and his empire's position fundamentally weakened. The Zalari matriarch spoke next, her skin patterns showing deep uncertainty. "The Zalari Commonwealth recognizes that humanity has demonstrated unexpected capabilities. We are prepared to discuss full membership status." One by one, the other council members voiced their agreement. The Nexari trade prince spoke of new opportunities for commerce with an advanced civilization. The Andalite representative mentioned mutual benefits from technological exchange. Even the proud Corvani delegation, led by a subdued admiral, Thexim, acknowledged humanity's right to equal status. But Eugene wasn't finished. The terms she presented for humanity's membership would have been unthinkable just days earlier. "The Terran Federation will join the galactic community as a founding member of a new governing structure," she announced. "We propose the creation of a reformed council with equal representation for all major powers, including humanity." The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Founding member? Reformed council? The humans weren't just asking to join the existing order. They were demanding to reshape it entirely. "Furthermore," Eugene continued, "the Terran Federation will maintain complete military independence. We will honor galactic law and respect the sovereignty of other civilizations. But we will not submit to external oversight of our defensive capabilities." Elder Nixera of the Ancient Confederacy raised a withered hand for attention. The Ancient being had watched the rise and fall of countless civilizations, and her words carried immense weight. "The proposal has merit," she said simply. "Recent events have demonstrated that the current galactic order requires adjustment. Perhaps it is time for new voices to be heard." The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some representatives argued against giving the humans such prominent positions so quickly. Others pointed out that humanity's military capabilities made opposition pointless. A few suggested that human technological innovations could benefit all galactic civilizations. In the end, pragmatism won. The galaxy's great powers had learned the hard way that humanity couldn't be ignored or dismissed. If they wanted to maintain any influence in galactic affairs, they would have to accept the new reality. The vote was unanimous. Humanity would be granted full membership with equal status among the great powers. But the real changes were only beginning. Admiral Te Ho accepted appointment as the first human representative to the Galactic Defense Council. His initial proposals shocked military commanders throughout known space. Instead of building larger fleets and more powerful weapons, Te Ho advocated for rapid response forces designed to prevent conflicts before they started. "War between major powers serves no one's interests," he explained to the assembled military leaders. "Our goal should be to make such conflicts impossible, not to prepare for them." The Admiral's approach was revolutionary. Where galactic military doctrine focused on overwhelming force and territorial conquest, human strategy emphasized mobility, precision, and conflict prevention. Captain Boram, now famous throughout the galaxy as the officer who destroyed the Conquest of Stars became an instructor at the newly established Galactic Military Academy. Her lectures on advanced tactics drew students from dozens of species, all eager to learn the secrets of human military success. "The key isn't having the biggest guns," she told her first class of alien officers. "The key is making sure you never have to use them." Her approach to warfare, precise, efficient, and aimed at ending conflicts quickly with minimal casualties, became the new standard for galactic military operations. Meanwhile, Ambassador Yunji led humanity's diplomatic expansion throughout the galaxy. Her approach was as revolutionary as the military reforms. Instead of the traditional galactic model of client states and tributary relationships, Yunji promoted genuine partnerships based on mutual benefit. The first test came when she returned to the Rythan colonies that had once dismissed her so rudely. Queen Velthara, who had previously received human diplomats in a storage room, now offered the full honors of state. "Ambassador Yunji," the Queen said formally, "the Rythan Commonwealth would be honored to establish formal relations with the Terran Federation." Yunji accepted graciously, but her terms were different from anything the galaxy had seen before. Instead of demanding tribute or territorial concessions, humanity offered technology sharing, educational exchanges, and mutual defense agreements that benefited both species equally. The human model of diplomacy spread rapidly throughout the galaxy. Species that had been locked in centuries-old conflicts found new ways to resolve their differences. Trade partnerships replaced exploitation. Cooperative research replaced technological hoarding. Dr. So Young, the xenobiologist who had been mocked during humanity's early diplomatic missions, now headed the Galactic Science Consortium. Her research into interspecies cooperation and cultural exchange became the foundation for a new era of galactic civilization. "We're not trying to build an empire," she explained to a gathering of alien scientists. "We're trying to build a community where every species can contribute their unique strengths." The changes weren't just political and military. Human technology, no longer hidden behind diplomatic deception, began transforming galactic civilization. Medical advances that extended lifespans across species, energy systems that made interstellar travel faster and safer, communication networks that connected civilizations across the galaxy in real time. But perhaps the most important change was psychological. The galaxy's ancient powers had been forced to confront their own arrogance and complacency. The species they had dismissed as primitive had outthought, outfought, and outmaneuvered them at every turn. Director Hyun Woo, the architect of humanity's rise to power, remained largely in the shadows. But his influence could be seen in every aspect of human galactic policy. The careful planning, the strategic patience, the willingness to think beyond traditional limitations, all bore his mark. In a rare public appearance, he offered his assessment of humanity's new position. "We didn't seek to conquer the galaxy," he said. "We sought to earn our place in it. The difference is that conquest creates enemies, while earning respect creates allies." The results spoke for themselves. Within a year of the Battle of Sol, the galaxy was more peaceful than it had been in centuries. Border disputes were resolved through negotiation rather than warfare. Trade flourished between species that had been enemies for millennia. Scientific cooperation produced breakthroughs that benefited everyone. The Galactic Council, reformed according to human proposals, became a genuinely representative body where all voices could be heard. The old system of ancient powers, dictating to younger civilizations, was replaced by genuine democracy and mutual respect. 5 years after humans first appeared before the Galactic Council as humble supplicants, Ambassador Yu Jin stood once again, in the Great Chamber. This time, she wasn't requesting membership. She was delivering the annual State of the Galaxy address as the elected president of the Galactic Council. 5 years ago, she began, humanity came to this chamber asking to be heard. You laughed at our pretensions and dismissed our capabilities. Today, we stand together as equals in a galaxy more prosperous and peaceful than ever before. She paused, looking around the chamber at representatives who now regarded her with respect rather than amusement. The lesson we've all learned is simple. Never underestimate the power of those who are willing to listen, learn, and work toward a better future. Humanity's greatest strength was never our technology or our military. It was our refusal to accept that things had to remain as they always had been. The applause that followed was genuine and sustained. Representatives from across the galaxy stood to honor not just humanity's achievements, but the new era of cooperation and prog.